This is part one of a seminar I gave at the 2014 Western Washington Sportsman Show in Puyallup, Washington. And we're talking about floating jigs for steelhead. Floating jigs for steelhead is easy for anglers of all ages and skill level, and it can be very effective for putting those metal heads to the boat. In part one, we'll cover getting set up and choosing the right equipment.
So my name is Doug St. Denis. I'm with Ridge to River Outdoors. I'm a river guide. I fish salmon, steelhead, sturgeon. We fish from the Skagit River down to the Columbia River, just kind of follow the prime fishing. And today we're going to talk about jig fishing under a float for steelhead. And one of the first questions I usually get when we're jig fishing under a float is, will this work for salmon? Yes. A lot of times the jig size might be a little different because that time of year maybe the water's a little bit different. But generally speaking, what we'll talk about today is going to work for you guys for salmon fishing. So I brought a few things for you guys here to look at. And the first thing I want to talk about is your rod size, your line size, your reel size. Because if you don't have the right equipment and you go out there with your trout set, or you go out there with a big heavy salmon pole, or you go out there with a bait casting set up and it's not balanced right, you guys are going to get frustrated. And you're going to say, you know what? Forget this jig fishing. It's well worth your time to fish for steelhead with jigs. So the first thing is, I like a nice long rod. This is a 9'6" light action by St.Croix. This is the Avid series, okay? These are the rods that I drift fish with. These are the rods that I float jigs with, and they work just fine. Now, do you guys have to go out there and spend, $300-400 on a rod to go jig fishing? No, you don't. But with that said, you do need to get the right size, because if you don't have the right size, you're going to get frustrated when you're trying to cast this rod. One of the things these nice long rods do is allow you to keep that line up on top of the water and manage the belly if the main line starts getting pulled down river. Because a jig is moving through the water. And that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to manage the line in the water, and that's what the long rod does for you. Okay? It's also going to help you cast a lot further. You guys will notice on this setup that I just got my drifter all twisted up on. These drifters aren't supposed to be this short. I'll cast this for you and let you see. This is an 1/8 ounce jig with an 1/8 ounce float, and we'll talk about that in a second. I don't have any weight on this, and I'm barely casting. And look at the distance I just went, right? I'm barely moving that, and it went that far. So we'll talk about weight and stuff, but that rod lets you get that out there that far, okay? You need a reel that's going to match this. So get a decent, don't break the bank, decent reel to match with your 9'6" rod. A good size reel, it's going to be in the 2500 series, okay? The 2500 is kind of a standard, and it's also like a series. Daiwa, Shimano, they use that 2500, 3500 to dictate the size of the reel and how much line you can put on it. This is a 2500 series size. It's just not a 2500. In fact, I fish Plueger Supremes, and this is the 8235. But it's the same size, and it balances so that you're not killing your elbow, okay? Line. I'm fishing 10-pound main line. Okay, 10 pound. I'm in a boat. It's a dynamic system. Fish takes off, I can follow the fish. How many boat guys do we have? Fish lighter line, you'll have more fun. Okay? Bank guys. So I've only got a couple boat guys, the rest of you are on the bank. A lot of times you need a little heavier line to keep the fish in the hole. I know how many of us have gone down to the river and there's 15 guys and you get to move like 5 feet. You need a little heavier line to keep that fish in the pocket with you. Now, if you go down to the bank and you've got a ton of room to chase your fish, well, that's all right. Fish 10-pound line, chase your fish, right? So, leaders, fluorocarbon leaders. Fluorocarbon's great. It disappears. And if you're fishing braided line, you definitely need fluorocarbon, because one thing that you don't want to do, you absolutely 100% do not want to put braided line right to your jig. And I see guys do this all the time. In fact, I pull tackle out of the water, and they've tied braid right to the jig, and the first thing that happens, it gets snagged up, and you've got about 100 yards of braid in the water, and braid catches every branch and twig and tree and everything, and it's just a giant mess. Fish get caught in it. But with that said, braid is awesome for jig fishing. The reason braid is so awesome is because it does one thing. What is that? It floats. So when you've got your jig out there and you're going through the drift, right? Your line is on top of the water. It's easy to just lift up, manage that main line. That main line's not getting drugged down river as fast. And it's great because you can get 10-pound diameter in what? 35, 40-pound test. Talk about keeping a fish in the hole. So you can fish the right size diameter and really keep that fish in the hole, right? More sensitivity. Now, do you absolutely have to fish braid? No, you don't. These rods are rigged with mono. I run plug rods and I run free drifting rods when we're fishing for steelhead. Because if you were here earlier and you heard Bob Cratcher talking about pulling plugs, we'll jump from pulling plugs to drift fishing to float fishing. If it's not working, we're going to change it up, right? I'm not going to run my plug rods, my drift rods, and my float rods because I need a 40-foot boat to hold all that stuff. So I'll grab these rods and I'll run mono. Now what I'll do is I'll take fluorocarbon and I'll tie fluorocarbon into my mono because I do have fluorocarbon in the boat. Now you guys have to understand I'm standing in about 15 inches of water, okay? So this setup has to be a lot shorter to work in here, but right on here is a knot. That is called the uni knot. It is not hard to tie, guys. It's easy. If you guys would just take an hour to learn how to tie the uni knot, it's very simple. I will tell you this as a secret. If you pull up a picture of a uni knot on the internet, it's going to have these nice circular round little things. Your fishing line doesn't do that. Okay? So essentially, rather than thinking when you see that picture of making these little nice circles to make the uni knot, don't do that. Just lay the line over itself, almost like you're tying a fisherman's knot. Finish the uni knot, start tightening it up, it'll be perfect. And in a little bit when we're done, you guys take a look at this uni knot. I tied this in the booth about 30 minutes ago. You can tie it on the river. Literally, once you figure it out, it takes just a few minutes to do that, okay? And it's really easy, but I will put fluorocarbon on my mono with a uni knot, okay? So once you get that figured out, it's easy, all right? So we've got our rod, our reel, our main line, we've got our leaders. Next thing we need to start getting into is our jigs. You have to choose a size of jig. Most commonly, you guys are going to be fishing 1/8 ounce jigs. Those are all 1/8 ounce. If you're going to change size for steelheading, I go down in weight, not up. 1/8 ounce is the most common. This is a sample of what I have in the boat. I have 8 of these and they're full. Every compartment is full. And my 2 sizes are 1/8 ounce and 16 ounce for steelhead. All right? Bigger is not better. Okay? Bigger is not better. You need to match your float. And there is a lot of variety out there. This is just a sample of the variety for floats. Your float should match your jig. Believe it or not, there's float sizes, and if you look at the side of it, it'll tell you 1 ounce. I see this all the time. I literally watched this in a sporting goods store. Guy went up, chose, and I mean a handful at $3 a piece, jigs, and he said, oh, I need to get some floats. And he went right over there and he grabbed like 4 packs of these. This is a 1 ounce float. Under, believe it or not, that is a 1/8 ounce jig. It's called the Juicy Fruit by Over the Edge Tackle. It's a wonderful looking jig, but a terrible looking float. See, he liked that jig. That float probably scared the poo out of him though. I mean, look at the size of that thing. But look at what it's doing. Jig wants to get down there and do its job for you. The float's just going to lay on the side of the water like that. Okay? Steelhead can bite lightly sometimes. Think of how much pressure it's going to take to start tipping the float up and then for it to go down. So don't do this. Balance your tackle. I'm not going to tell you that one float is better than another because it's not. But you guys, I love these. These are great floats. You know, people are like, oh, you know, you can't adjust it. Whew. Took a while, but I got her done. Okay, listen. Steelhead water, 3 to 8 feet, generally, right? 3 to 8 feet. They like to sit about 12, 15, 18 inches off the bottom. This works just fine. But if you don't like that adjustability because it's just not working for you, then we can get something else. It's called a slip float. And I love them. What's that? They're just wood floats with little rubber stoppers, top and bottom. Yeah, all the stoppers come with it. You don't have to worry about threading on a stopper on your main line. Or you could go with a slip float. If you want more flexibility, you can go with a slip float. And there's a variety. Talk about choice. There's lots of variety. On here I've got a stopper. I can move that stopper. And the reason I can do that is, let's say for instance, I want to fish some water and it's 6 feet deep, but it's way, way over there. I don't want to cast this much line off the end of my rod, right? That's too much line. So what you need to do is you need to get a slip float if I want to fish way over there, because the slip float allows you to tie or put the thing that stops your weight or your float from sliding too far up. It stops right there. Well, that'll go through the eyes of your hook, and there's a variety of methods for that. Some of you guys may be familiar with this. Many of you guys seen these bobber stop knots.
That wraps it up for part 1. Make sure you move on to part 2, where I will talk about choosing floats, jigs, and using scent.